Hey everyone, this is a very special episode with a top tier entrepreneur and founder from Silicon Valley. His name's Esteban. I met him back when his company was just one person and they had raised $0. Now they've raised $130 million and they have a team of incredible people. They've raised from JP Morgan, they've raised from Thoma Bravo, they've raised from Tiger Global, they've raised from some of the top names in finance, and he talks about social entrepreneurship, how to start a business that you care about and makes profit. He also talks about how to get your first customers. There's a ton of lessons in here for entrepreneurs to learn. So how to get your first customers, how to find revenue, how to find a problem and identify it, and then build a business around it. Awesome stuff. Can't wait for you to listen. Enjoy the episode. Bye.
It's so good to see you, man.
I know.
Where are you living?
I'm in Florida right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you paint?
I'm glad you asked. I'm selling these NFTs. Yes.
No way. That's so cool.
Yeah. I started during
Where can I,
COVID.
where can I see the NFTs? Are they on OpenSea
I
or some
have
other platform?
one or two on OpenSea. I have probably 150 physical paintings, and they're all in that
Huh?
weird fifth grade style. So I'm gonna
Yeah,
see if I can find a platform where I can sell them online as an NFT, but then also ship the actual product to somebody.
that's so cool. Well, I would love to. I would love to look.
All right,
I'm not the biggest art person in the world, but you mean a lot to me, and so that would be really cool.
that's awesome. Are you
I'd love
collecting
to have your art.
NFTs or collecting physical art or just Brandon's art?
Um, Do I collect NFTs? Not really, no. I mean, I bought like some NFTs whenever there was the NFT craze. Um, but but I haven't kept up with it. Um, but yeah, so it'd be really cool. I'm gonna check it out. So how do I find it? I search for your name on OpenSea?
Uh, I think I have some alias. I'll find it and send it to you. Let me make a note.
Okay, that's awesome.
And you'll be my
How did
first
you get into it?
customer. That'd be perfect. I'd
Hell
love
yeah.
that.
For full circle.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, you taught me about crypto. Now look who's selling to who.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
So what are you doing in LA?
Just visiting friends, you
Nice.
know,
Beautiful place.
here for here for the week and then heading back. Um, Very cool. And what's the story on the podcast? How did this come about?
I've always wanted to do it, and I feel
Mm,
like I've had so many conversations with so many cool people over the years that it's almost a shame that some of them aren't documented. And so
mm,
my personal interest, like I love hearing people's origin stories. Where were you born? And then how did you get to today? To me, that story arc is just the most fascinating thing. And each person has a unique story. So I'm kind of going through my network of people that have done great things over the last 5, 10 years and am asking them, okay, from birth to where you are today, how did that transgress? And that's everything from your personality to your business, and I think specifically with yours, we met in, I think it was probably 2016 or 17 in San Francisco's cafe. And you were,
yeah, it
say it again.
was February of 2018.
Look at that guy, came prepared.
Yeah,
And, you were pitching a different business than what TRM turned into. And I think that's fascinating that you were able to kind of navigate the like rocky waters and get there. So would love to
yeah,
just cover all that, and we'll make sure to end on time. I apologize for the late start here.
yeah. No worries. Let's do it. Cool.
All right, let's kick it off. So welcome everybody. Hey Esteban, good to see you. Can you
Good to see you.
maybe walk us through a quick background of yourself? And don't go into details because I have a lot of questions lined up.
Yeah, sure. Hi everybody. My name is Esteban. I'm co-founder CEO of TRM Labs. I've been working on this company for about 5 years now. And before that, I did consulting. I was at McKinsey, worked for a nonprofit in Mexico City. And then before that, I was in college. I studied government. And then before that, I grew up in Texas.
Studied government, really?
Yeah. I studied government, economics, and computer science. I majored in government. And I was actually torn all throughout college because I couldn't imagine finding a job that blended my interest in public policy, government, international relations, economics, and computer science. But now, I mean, that is my job. My job is thinking about, how do digital assets impact the way that the world does commerce? How does it impact, financial crime, money laundering, and how can both the private sector and the public sector work together to combat those risks that we see?
Interesting. You do not think of entrepreneurship overlapping with government in many ways. That's nice you found something.
Yeah, I feel very, very fortunate. I love my job.
Can you tell the listeners what exactly TRM does today?
Sure. Yeah. So TRM, we're a blockchain intelligence company. What that means is we analyze data from different blockchains. We're on over 25 different blockchains right now, to detect illicit activity, whether that's money laundering or fraud or hacks, terrorist financing, ransomware attacks. So we analyze the data, we detect these things, and we deliver that data to our customers via APIs and through web applications. We sell to financial institutions like banks. We sell to crypto businesses like exchanges and NFT marketplaces, as well as to the public sector, law enforcement and regulatory authorities. In the private sector, many of these organizations that use our products, they actually have regulatory requirements around preventing their platforms from being used for money laundering. And then obviously, like, the public sector, law enforcement, they have an interest in fighting crime, and they can use our data, they can use our software to detect that stuff and to investigate it.
Is it crypto specific?
It is, yeah. So we focus on detecting money laundering and illicit, activity in digital assets. We're on 25 blockchains, over 1 million different digital assets that we monitor.
What do you define as a digital asset?
So any token, whether that's an ERC20 token, a stable coin, whether it's an NFT, really any asset that lives on top of blockchains.
So those 25 blockchains equate to the million digital assets.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow. Where
Ethereum.
Go for it.
Ethereum has something like over 750,000 different ERC20 tokens, and when you start looking at Binance Smart Chain and Tron and Solana, and then you start looking at NFTs as well, that's how you get to over 1 million different assets.
And do you, because it's on the blockchain, you don't need permission from those 25 blockchains. You just go in there, tap into the APIs, then you can get access to all the data?
Yeah, that's right. So like this data that is on the blockchains, it's public data. You can kind of think about it like, you can think of TRM as Google Maps for crypto, where the raw blockchain data is just the satellite imagery. That's just, what it is. But then what we do is we add that extra layer of context and metadata around what are the labels, on the map. Oh, that transaction over here is actually, someone making a ransom payment, or that transaction over here is someone being defrauded and falling for some, investment scam, or maybe this transaction is someone executing a hack and subsequently, laundering those proceeds. And so once you have this enriched picture of on-chain activity, that becomes really valuable for businesses that want to risk score the transactions on their platform. If you're an exchange, like, it'd be really valuable to know, hey, this deposit of 10 Bitcoin is actually sourced from someone selling stolen credit cards. You would block that transaction. Or relatedly, if you're the FBI or your law enforcement, you are seeing that there was a big hack, you want to trace the flow of stolen funds to see where it ultimately ended up, like, you can use our tool to do that.
So that logically makes a lot of sense, how you would be able to track stolen funds. But how would you identify a bad actor just from?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the interesting thing about bad actors is a lot of times they want to be discovered, especially if it's illicit commerce. So if you're saying, like, hey, I'm selling stolen credit cards on the dark web, you know, threat actors are going to say, you know, here's the payment address, here's where you can make that payment. And so oftentimes, you know, or relatedly, if you're soliciting donations for a terrorist group and you're running a terrorist financing campaign, well, if you're raising money for terrorism, you actually need to find people who want to donate to terrorism, and you're going to be, you know, showcasing, you know, the Bitcoin addresses or the Ethereum addresses that you're using. You know, right now we're tracking violent extremist groups that are sending donations to you know, Russian armed forces in the war in Ukraine, and you know, in that scenario, I mean, those addresses are public, and that's a very public donation campaign that's being run. So you take those addresses that you've associated with these various categories of risk, and then you can use data science and other techniques to extrapolate from that. So if you know that this address is associated with, you know, a hacker, how can you infer that, you know, these other addresses in the neighborhood or in the vicinity are also associated with that hacker?
Wow. Wow. No wonder you love your job. That's really important work.
It's a lot of fun, and it's really impactful. Our mission is to build a safer financial system for billions of people, and you know, it's just this underlying belief, which is that if digital assets have this promise of enabling, you know, millions of people around the world for, you know, being their own bank, or, you know, having access to financial services at the speed of the internet, there's going to be new risks. Like all of a sudden, you know, a hack in crypto is not people losing their usernames and passwords, it's people potentially losing their life savings. And so if we're going to have this technology that I think can deliver a lot of good to the world, we also have to have the technology to manage the associated risks.
All right, I have a million questions about TRM, but taking a step back, so can you talk about where you were born and what that upbringing was like?
Sure. I grew up in Mexico. Lived there until I was 4 or 5. Then I moved to Texas, and I had a pretty standard, you know, Texas upbringing. I went to a public high school outside of Houston with thousands of people. You know, it's like football and BB guns and barbecue. I didn't realize that I lived such a Texas upbringing until I kind of left Texas, and I was like, "What do you mean you didn't? You know, what do you mean not everyone played football in your school?"
What do
Like,
you mean it lasts to a cow for fun? What are you talking about?
yeah, exactly. And I loved it. It was a great upbringing. I was a waiter at Buffalo Wild Wings, and you know, throughout high school, and you know, it was pretty standard Texas upbringing.
Any impact on your mindset from working at Buffalo Wild Wings doing service jobs early on?
I mean, I remember thinking in high school, like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to want to go to college. And then I did that, and then I said, okay, I definitely want to go to college. So that was an important experience. I mean, service jobs are they're very difficult. You're on your feet for, you know, 9, 10 hours a day, and nothing humbles you like picking up half-eaten wings from underneath, you know, tables, and then not getting tipped or anything. You know, like that's yeah. I think there's some quote about just the world would be a better place if everyone worked in service at some point.
Experienced that, yeah. I worked at Chipotle towards the end of high school and college, so we didn't have to deal with the tip problem, but it was definitely quite the rush during lunch. That was tough to deal with.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
where'd you go to college?
I went to Dartmouth. It's a liberal arts college in New Hampshire, and I absolutely loved it. It was it's where I fell in love with the outdoors. That was obviously not something I had really been exposed to growing up in Houston. But Dartmouth has wonderful access to, you know, kayaking and climbing and hiking, and it was a very formative experience.
What does your parents think as you've gone through this journey, moving from Mexico to Texas to Dartmouth?
They're obviously very supportive. They, I think, in some ways saw the entrepreneurship, coming. I've always been a builder. They're builders themselves. My mom's an artist, and my dad's an engineer. And so I grew up seeing people like will things into existence, and having a dream or imagining something, and then working hard to make it come true, whether that was a sculpture or a building. And I think growing up, I was always like into tinkering and building things and wanting to put things out into the world. And so I suspect, I don't know, I haven't actually talked to them about it, but I suspect that this is not surprising.
Were they entrepreneurial then, the two of them, or one of them?
Yeah. They both were. I mean, my mom, an independent artist, both sculpture and paintings, and my dad, a civil engineer, who has been very entrepreneurial.
So your mom, how long has she been self-employed?
My whole life, yeah.
Okay, so that's got to make quite the impact on you as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember going to like art shows with her. She would, there would be local art shows in Houston, and there was one in, I think, Galveston we went to for several years, and I was maybe 7 years old or 10 years old, and I was manning she would be selling her paintings, and I would be manning. I was her manager, quote unquote. She let me take people's money and give them a receipt. And I think like, and I think it also normalized being vulnerable and like putting yourself out there, because there would sometimes be shows where like nobody comes by or like nobody buys anything, and it's like kind of disappointing. But then, I see her like, just kind of deal with it and push forward. And I think it just normalized putting yourself out there, like creating things and seeing how they land, and then iterating.
Yeah, I mean, also from her perspective, she probably just loved spending the time with you. When I was around the same age, 7 years old, my dad used to take me to the end of the nature trail in Michigan. So everybody would power walk or go on their run. And we would set up a lemonade stand there because that's when they needed it most. And we would sit there for hours. And that was where I really got my juices from, pun intended. But I
That's
remember
awesome.
that, he loved it, although he only made $3 a day, but he clearly loved
Yeah.
doing
Yeah, and you get unlimited lemonade. What's not to like?
it. Exactly. My cost of goods sold was zero, so it was fantastic for me. Yeah.
Awesome.
And so did you ever want to do art or engineering, or what was kind of your mindset? It was strictly the government was the initially?
So what's interesting? No, I actually, I was never interested in starting a company, until I was maybe 16 or 17. I think growing up, I was always interested in like how can you make the world a better place. And the most kind of direct line that I drew in my head was, oh, like the nonprofit sector. Like, of course I'll go work in the nonprofit sector. And then in high school, I organized a charity fundraiser. And I realized, I remember in year one doing this fundraiser, running 120 miles an hour to raise like $10,000 for this school. And
Impressive at that age. That's really impressive.
well, I mean, well, so we did this fundraiser, and we raised this money, and then when year two came around, it was like we had to start from scratch. It was like, okay, you got to start over. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, man, like nonprofits are really hard. Like you're constant. You have to like always be running 120 miles an hour, and once you give the money, the clock resets to zero, and you're kind of on the hook for you're very reliant on other people's goodwill and generosity. And around that same, like when I went to college, I got exposed to this idea of social entrepreneurship, which is like, well, what if you could build a business that had a social mission attached to it? And then you're not leaning on people's generosity, you're not relying on people's goodwill, you're relying on people's like self-interest and their own incentives. And by virtue of just capitalism, you can achieve social good. And I did an internship in Thailand for a social enterprise called Suddenly Arts in college, and it's this this uh, this company, nonprofit, but they have a business model attached to it where the Karen people in northern Thailand would make textiles. They sell it in Chiang Mai, and it generates income for folks in more rural areas. And that was like, oh, this whole social entrepreneurship thing actually works. You can build sustainable businesses that generate, mission impact sustainably over time, and that can scale, independently. And I think that's when I realized that like business isn't just this thing to enrich shareholders. It can actually be used as a tool to do good in the world.
Uh, it's a tough. So I think I was very much like that over the last 10, 15 years. And then once my last company failed, it really put that into question for me. I hate to say that, but it really made me question, um, because I almost felt like I was putting myself too into, okay, let's like if I was doing good at the expense of our company. So for example, people would say, can we pay you for this product, or how much is the product? And I'd say it's free, don't worry about it, just use it. As long as you use it, it's fine. So it's a very hard line to walk between doing good and then also maintaining revenue and being able to pay for the good you do. And it really, it impacted me. It kind of shook up my world because I had a very similar worldview to you. And it really made me question, okay, how important is revenue, and can you actually do good without the revenue? So I love social entrepreneurship. I kind of forgot about the entrepreneurship side for a while. So it's good that you've been able to find something that fits both of those needs.
It's super hard, and we're very, very fortunate to kind of to have that alignment between revenue and mission impact. The reason why it's so hard is because the universe of ideas that people have is much, much larger than the universe of ideas that people are willing to give you money for. you know? And then the universe of ideas that people are willing to give you money for is a lot larger than the universe of ideas that people will give you money for, and that you're able to generate at a cost lower than what they're able to give you for, i.e., profitable ideas. And then that universe is still larger than the universe of ideas where you can do that, and it's a product and a mission that you're proud of. So the way that I think capitalism has adjusted for this historically was this whole idea of like corporate social responsibility, where first, like, let's just build something profitable, let's generate profit, and then you would allocate a percentage of that towards mission impact. Maybe you donate to charity as part of your business, maybe you donate volunteer hours. There's different mechanisms. I think if you can crack it where actually by the product that you sell is something that makes the world a better place, I mean, that's awesome. That's like the nirvana or something, like the trifecta, if you can nail it. But it's very, very difficult. And I think entrepreneurs should be extremely proud if you can just solve the first problem, which is like build something that the world wants and you can deliver it profitably.
And I think there's different routes to doing good, because if you make a lot of money doing the traditional business route, you can always go back and donate, create nonprofits once you kind of hit that level of success. And to your point,
Yeah,
it's so hard to do what you're doing where you feel this mission on two sides.
100%. And there's a lot of different ways to integrate service and giving into your life. Like, frankly, being a parent is incredibly, service oriented, and, it has nothing to do with business or entrepreneurship. Like, I think everyone is on their own journey and their own way of like finding how they can make a positive impact on the world. And there's a lot of different correct answers to that.
Yeah. Are you married or have children?
I don't know. No, my,
We're doing this on Valentine's Day, so I kind of assumed, but I had to confirm.
yeah, exactly. This is my date with Don is what I have in my calendar.
What do you remember? Speaking of love, what do you remember about the first time you met me in the Cafe Centro in San Francisco? Or just the general
Um,
meeting? What do you remember about that?
it was incredibly impactful. I mean, so I'll give the audience some context. Rahul, my co-founder, we moved to San Francisco in January of 2018 with this dream of starting a company, and we had zero connections. We knew nobody, and I remember sitting in our apartment in Soma, looking out the window, and knowing that there was this like big world out there of investors and entrepreneurs and like people who were starting companies, but feeling like I had no connection to it and like no way to be connected. And so you actually you posted something on Twitter about like, hey, we're having a workshop. I think it was called AR Kitchen or something like that. And you said, we're taking ideas or applications for this workshop. And on the whim, Rolf and I were like, well, what idea can we come up with quickly that maybe we can apply with just to start go out there into the world and start talking to people. This was exactly 30 days after moving to San Francisco. And so I think we applied with this idea of like Pokemon Go for crypto, where people would, find tokens in the real world or something. And none of us, neither Rahul nor I, believed like this was going to be the startup idea, but this was just like a way for us to like talk to other humans in Silicon Valley. And you were very gracious. You responded and said, I saw your application come through, and I think that my colleague Larry might be interested in learning more. And that was like the foray into Silicon Valley. When we actually met, I learned a really important property about Silicon Valley, which is that when we shared our idea with you, your reaction was very supportive. It was like, well, yeah, and here's all the ways that this could work, and then you could try this, and then you could do this, and have you thought about this way? And like Silicon Valley has this magical thing where like people have seen enough crazy ideas be wildly successful to learn to be open-minded about crazy ideas and to consider them. And when you are, two people in an apartment and you have no hope to hang on to and no reason to believe that you can be successful, like the fact that you were, supportive and listening and saying, yeah, go for it. I mean, that makes a world difference. You just need like somebody to believe in you and to say, yeah, you're not crazy, like go for it. And so yeah, I mean, it was a really important, I think, coffee chat that you and I had in Cafe Centro.
It's so funny because from my perspective, and just so everybody's listening, I did this episode with Larry a few days ago, so the audience will know him as well. But yeah, Larry was someone who had been investing as an angel investor and really at the heart of Silicon Valley for about a decade at that point. And so after I met you, I remember calling him and saying, hey, Larry, I met this Esteban guy. We don't really do crypto. Like I was running a virtual reality fund. I said, I don't really think metaverse is also crypto. And I don't really know that much about crypto. And he was talking a lot about crypto, but he seems like a really talented person. And I think he's going to figure something out. And so I made the introduction to Larry. And then outside of our fund, Larry ended up investing into you. And I assume similar to how he worked with me, he was extremely helpful over the first year and a half, 2 years to help you get going.
Yeah, Larry's was incredibly helpful. I remember before my lunch with Larry, like Googling, how to talk to angel investors because I had no idea what I was doing, you know, and like there were certain phrases that this Google article told me, like, you're supposed to ask, would you be interested in investing? Which sounds obvious, but like I didn't know that you were supposed to ask that. And so, I had lunch with Larry, and at the end, I'm super nervous. I finally like mumbled out those words, would you be interested in investing? And he said yes, which also was really surprising to me.
You're like, wait, I got to read the article. You weren't supposed to say yes the first time.
What do I say? Exactly. So then I remember the article said something. You have to ask them like, well, how much would you like to invest? So I I asked him, and he responded, and I just went back to Rahul and I said, like, I think we've got our first angel investor. This is awesome, and that was the start. And Larry was an amazing angel investor. We're really, really lucky. I think Larry understands something which, unless you've been in Silicon Valley long enough, you may not understand, and that is that getting to product market fit is a very windy road, and it's not logical. Like you can't whiteboard your way to product market fit. You have to like be out there in the market. You have to interact with customers, and Larry, I think, appreciates the windy road. He knew that when he signed that check, we were probably going to end up being something very, very different than what the idea was that we were pitching. He is very trusting of founders. Like in all that we would have weekly meetings with Larry to just kind of share our learnings. And we would have a meeting and say, well, I don't think that the idea that you invested in actually is going to work. And what we actually think we might, should do is A, B, and C. And Larry's response was, cool, sounds great. I think a different investor might have reacted very differently, but Larry appreciated that. And there was a lot of things that we learned from Larry in that year that we worked really closely with him.
That's an interesting point, because you're right. He's very flexible. We've renegotiated terms a year later. We've done a lot of stuff where he just really does what's best for the company and the entrepreneur. So it's interesting you notice that same thing. Do you remember? So you started pitching this kind of Pokemon Go crypto scavenger hunt. And now you're talking about helping the FBI and large organizations solve crime. So that's a very windy path, I have to imagine. Can you walk me through that decision process of how you got there?
Yeah. I think before we started this company, we had done a lot of research and like reflection on how companies get to product market fit. And I had seen a YouTube video by Andy Radcliffe, who is the CEO of Wealthfront, and he started a venture firm or worked at a venture firm. And he has this video on YouTube where he basically says that a lot of great companies were built on the back of a new technology. And he goes on to describe that like innovation is often found around the corner. So innovation isn't found by like sitting in your living room and thinking of something. It's found by being out there in the market and then being exposed to brand new problems that hadn't been discovered before. And so I think with these two things in mind, Rahul and I set out to go build a company in the blockchain space. And we knew that, okay, one, blockchain is a disruptive technology that's going to enable tons of new use cases that have never been seen before. So kind of check that first box. And then we knew that the problems that blockchain was going to introduce, the problems that needed to be solved, we didn't know what those were. And in fact, nobody really knew what those were because, the technology was brand new. And so we said, why don't we just start building something that kind of gets us out in the world and starts exposing us to new types of problems, And I remember we started designing this game, like Pokemon Go for crypto. And we were whiteboarding like the different smart contracts that we would need to build. We were whiteboarding like the analytics infrastructure that we would need to read the data off the blockchain to be able to tell, users if they actually picked up an asset and give, whatever. And when we looked at the whiteboard, it was like, you could kind of see that there was 10 different companies that would need to get built just to enable us to go build this game. It was like, wow, we were way too early and none of this infrastructure has been invented yet. So I think in the back of our mind, we always knew like, well, maybe we would need to pivot, into one of these use cases that we had discovered as like enabling infrastructure. One of the ones that became more and more clear to us was this idea around, okay, if in our game we need to know what's happening on the blockchain to inform the user experience, surely other games and other applications that use blockchain are going to need to know what's happening on the blockchain. So what if we created an analytics company? What if we created a company that ingested data from the blockchains, that made it useful and valuable, and then enriched it so that if you were building a game or any application, you could see who your customers were and how they were using your assets, etc. So that's when we pivoted into what we call token relationship management, or TRM, the CRM for Web3. And we thought that the first use case was going to be like growth analytics. We actually started pitching token companies and saying, hey, wouldn't it be nice if you had visibility into who's holding your token, like how many addresses are holding your token and how is that changing over time? And what we heard back instead from the market was, yeah, that would be nice, but can you help me, meet my anti-money laundering requirements? Can you help me actually see if people are using my assets for illicit activity? So, like all good entrepreneurs, we went back and Googled, what the customer just told us. So, we Googled anti-money laundering, we learned all about compliance, and we started building a solution towards that. That was about a year-long process of just, putting something out in the world and iterating, continuously based on what the customers were telling us they actually needed.
So did you do all that with Larry's capital during that year, or did you raise other money to extend the life?
We did. We had Larry's capital and a couple other angel investors, and in 2019, towards the end of 2018, so exactly about a year later, we raised $1.7 million from Blockchain Capital, and Blockchain Capital invested under this vision of token relationship management, building the analytics layer to power decisions in this new economy. Um, and and actually, I remember when you close a financing, there's always like a 2-month period between when the money hits the bank and when you actually announce it, because you're finalizing all the paperwork. And in that period, we went to Blockchain Capital and said, "Hey, I know that you invested under this idea of growth analytics and market intelligence, but we're getting a ton of demand for compliance. I think really we're a compliance company, we're a reg tech company." And they were extremely supportive and said, "Well, if that's what you're hearing from the market, go for it." And so we announced in January of 2019 the round, and we tried an experiment where we said, what if in our press release for this fundraise, we announce ourselves as a compliance company? And that morning I woke up and my phone was just like buzzing from all of these inbounds from different exchanges, saying that they needed these services. So that's when we said, okay, well, there's really a lot of demand here. We should focus on this use case.
Did you have customers or people testing the product prior to that press release and prior to all that inbound? And I'm talking specifically the compliance side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Trust Token, which is a stablecoin issuer, they were one of our first customers, and the first product that they signed up for was the growth analytics. They are a stablecoin company. They wanted to understand, how are people using this stablecoin? Like how many addresses are holding it? Are the balances increasing over time? Are they kind of stable, consistent? And the person who was our customer at that company sat next to the compliance person. The compliance person looked over their shoulder, saw our analytics, and said, "Hey, can I talk to these people? I'd love to see if I can use this analytics for compliance." And we visited. We basically lived in their office. We were going to their office all the time to understand how they were using the tool and what else they needed. And so we essentially got inside of one of the meeting rooms, and the compliance team described what they needed. We built it to their specs, keeping in mind that we wanted it to be flexible for other customers, and that's kind of how we got our start.
Amazing, the serendipity in life, how important that is. To your earlier
Mhm.
point, you can't just sit inside with a whiteboard and come up with the next thing. It's about just getting punched in the face over and over, and your
Absolutely.
POC sitting next to the right person during a Zoom call. Like that's really what it takes, and that comes through reps and numbers more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, luck is a huge thing in life, and there are things that you can do to increase luck, which is like, how do you just increase the number of shots at goal? Like, um, and that's I think very much like pre-product market fit. It's all about just like how do you increase the number of interactions you have with the market for the market to tell you something about what the product should be.
And so TrustCoin, I mean, you were really building the product for TrustCoin for the first.
Yeah,
Oh,
for Trust Token, the first several months, we were
yeah.
essentially building for them. Now, this type of like, I would say consulting driven product development is very effective, but you have to do it the right way, which is like you have to simultaneously be like zooming in to solve their problem, but zoom out and ask yourself, like, how should I design this product so that I can then go sell it to 1,000 more, people like them? And so we were always asking ourselves, okay, what is it that they need? But then how do we build this so that we could sell it to every other, crypto exchange, every other crypto, marketplace or asset issuer?
And there's a third part to that where when you're looking at it from a bird's eye view, you still have to be zoomed in enough that you're not building too general of a solution for too many people.
That's exactly right. You have to, yeah.
It's a very happy medium. How do you deal with stress throughout all this, the whole process?
Um, That's a good question.
It was hard for me, especially during lockdowns and things like that. I broke down a few times when I was running my company.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I can't say that like I'm a case study in managing stress effectively. Starting the company was extraordinarily stressful. A lot of nights of like waking. I know it's kind of a cliche, but like, yeah, a lot of nights where you can't go to sleep and you're looking at the clock and it's 2 a.m. and you're thinking to yourself, man, I really should go to sleep. But you're just so stressed out about whether you're going to survive. um, so, um, like momentum is a great cure. So like, we always were very thoughtful about like, how do we preserve momentum? And if we felt like something was like stagnating, or like maybe we weren't growing customers, or maybe the product wasn't right, we were just maniacal about like fixing it, and powering through. I think co-founders is really, really important. I mean, Rahul and I, there was a period of 2 to 3 years where we would just like go to the office first thing in the morning, and we'd stay there until midnight or later, and we'd come home and we would sleep and wake up and do it over again. And it was just, and you're working through weekends, and like
You are
kind of
living
having that
together.
shared, we were living together.
Yeah.
Just having that shared experience of being in the trenches, like was when I was down, he would power us through, and when he was down, I would power us through. Um, I think as the business starts, once you get product market fit, it things change, because then you're thinking about, well, how do you build a company around this product? It's less of like an existential question of like, do we even deserve to exist? Now you deserve to exist, but the question is, it's an execution game of, can you actually be successful in building something? And I like that stress more. you know, it's, for me, it's a lot easier type of stress. Once you have something that deserves to exist and that people need, and then it's just a question of how do you profitably grow it, versus questioning whether this project of yours is worthy of a company.
I was just reading last night. One of the guy, I think he's the guy who actually coined the phrase stress, but there's two types of stress in his mind. He just had a new book. There's distress and sous-stress. Distress is when you don't control the outcome as closely, and sous-stress is when you close it or control it. And that's really what you're talking about. Like when you're in that exploratory phase looking for product market fit, you don't control much other than just you're hoping that something happens your way. Whereas once you find it, okay, now it's on Esteban and Rahul's shoulders to go build this thing properly and scale that solution.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I hadn't heard that before, but that describes it perfectly.
Yeah. How did you meet Rahul?
We worked together for a nonprofit in Mexico City. We were both consultants working for McKinsey, and there was a nonprofit that McKinsey has helped to get off the ground called Generation.org, that does it runs youth employment programs. So they help young people in many countries around the world get their first job, and they didn't have like a technology team, and so they needed people to help hire developers and build a technology team. And Rahul and I were lucky enough to get staffed on that project, and we both have a technical background. We got a WeWork and hired developers, and said, wait a second, like, you like building teams and solving hard technical problems, like maybe we should start a company together.
What a story, man. Everything from Mexico to joining that nonprofit, meeting your co-founder early on, moving to the United States when you're 5, so earlier than that, but then going to Dartmouth and then realizing you don't want to do what you initially planned out in your major, and then meeting me and doing a scavenger hunt company, and then all of a sudden everything comes together. Rahul, government, crypto, and it's just this company that you're really proud of, and I can see how proud of it that you are, and you should be. It's like quite the story that you've accomplished here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I feel very fortunate. I remember Rahul, it was always very important to him to like find a company with a strong mission. He's an educator. He used to teach inner city youth in Chicago, and like, obviously he wanted to work for this youth unemployment nonprofit in Mexico. So he's very mission oriented. And I remember, for that first year where we were in search of product market fit, he was always like challenging us, like, how do we find something with an important mission? And when we found this like compliance use case of, well, how do you prevent money laundering? Like that was a little bit of smoke on the horizon of, oh, maybe there's something there that's really mission oriented. And actually it was like one of the first hacks that we saw in crypto, that we were able to use our technology to actually trace the flow of stolen funds. And then it started to click of, oh my gosh, like there's actually going to be a lot of different types of illicit activity, and building a safer financial system is something that you could actually build a profitable business around. That's when kind of all the stars aligned into, okay, business that the world needs, with an impact that we can dedicate several decades to, and be proud of.
Final question, and this one ties it all together. So you were at McKinsey.
Mhm.
Do you have any advice for people that are working in the corporate world and maybe similar to you and Rahul want something more out of what they're doing, but just are stuck in their kind of daily motions?
Sure. So I would say if you're interested in starting a company, one helpful piece of advice is that company building is actually very distinct stages with different skills needed for each of those stages. So oftentimes, I think, the oftentimes the starting point that people have is, oh, I want to start a company, therefore I need to learn, accounting and how to do market analysis, and I need to learn how to hire people, and I need to learn, basically all the things that you think of when you think of like running a company, quote unquote. The reality is like that's all stuff that happens in stage two. Stage two is building a company around a product that the world wants. Stage one is building a product that the world wants. Stage one is about building something into the world that people are willing to give you money for. Stage two is about how do you scale that and build a company around that can deliver that reliably and sustainably over time. A lot of people over-index on stage two skills. They don't spend enough time on stage one skills. And I learned that, the hard way with kind of another thing that I tried to get off the ground. And I actually I realized about 5 years before starting TRM that I needed to learn how to code, so that I, wasn't just like the quote unquote business strategy person that couldn't do anything real in stage one. In stage one, you need to either be able to write code or design, or maybe get by if you're a really good salesperson, but you got to be able to build something. And I think too often people either, and I was guilty of this, you lock yourself into thinking, oh, I'm just a business person, or I'm just like a strategy person. And it's like, no, you can be a builder, and you actually need to be a builder if you want to get through stage one to have the privilege to operate in stage two.
I felt like with the last thing I did, I built this amazing company, great people, great structure, international, Delaware C Corp, UK limited subsidiary. And I totally forgot that the product market fit was the actual heart of it. And I learned that lesson the hard way as well. So it's very interesting you say that. Yeah. And what about just the idea, just go for it? Is that something you subscribe to, or are you more of, hey, you should kind of get your feet wet and look for that product market fit while you have income from a real corporation?
Oh, interesting. Um, I think that if you can save 6 months, 6 to 12 months of income, and you're able to live off of that, or you're able to raise something, you should go for it and like be full time. There's no such thing as being a part-time entrepreneur. Like Yoda, do or do not. There is no try. Like jump in and do it. It is. I feel like with me obsessing over the company 100 hours a week, we barely made it. And it's hard for me to imagine being able to get there without just a Herculean, insane level of effort and obsession for the first, several months. The last thing I'll say is like that it's very important. The name of the game, persistence is very important, but persistence alone won't get you there. You have to be intellectually honest about, do I have the actual core ingredients of an important company? And that's like, do you actually have the right team to build what it is that you're seeking to build? Are you actually able to build what it is that you're seeking to build? Do you actually have enough? I would say, like, are you in the right market? Are you in the right location? Like, you have to get the core ingredients right. I think too often you see folks who haven't nailed like the core tenets and are just trying to like power through, and I feel like oftentimes it just leads to like 6 to 12 months of effort and then disappointment. And so really focus on like, do you have the right co-founder? Do you have the skills to build something? Do you have a market that you are going to obsess about? Once you have those, yes, then apply 110% effort and persistence.
All right, I promised I'd get you out of here on time. We're 1 minute over, so I want to let you go. But I appreciate this so much, Esteban, and it's very cool to hear Buffalo Wild Wings at the starting line, and now you're nearing towards the finish in a totally different product. So thank you for sharing.
Thanks so much, Don. Thank you for having me.